All right, thanks so much, Joey. Time now for a check of your top stories, and we start with the latest on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And it appears Russian forces are continuing to take aim at civilian targets in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky calling the latest round of attacks more evidence of war crimes carried out by Russian President Vladimir Putin. This comes as millions continue to try and escape all of the violence, the trip to the border becoming more difficult as the fighting intensifies. Jay Gray has been following the war and the humanitarian crisis along the Polish-Ukraine border and brings us the very latest.
Residential communities continue to be the target of Russian missiles, ripping apart an art school turned shelter in Mariupol with 400 people inside. In Kyiv, homes and a shopping center in ruins following the latest attack there.
It's unbelievable. I never see Kyiv like this, like now, what is going on. We have destroyed house, bomb, sea, and that's it.
Mayor Vitaly Klitschko encouraging soldiers on the front lines to hold their ground while other troops and volunteers prepare to patrol the capital city. Pressure that seems to be working. U.S. defense officials saying Russian ground troops are moving at a slower than expected pace. Chanting, "Go home," protesters seemingly turned back Russian military vehicles in the port city of Kherson. As millions continue to try and rush to safety, Ukrainian officials say more than 7,000 were rescued from the fighting Sunday on buses traveling through 4 humanitarian corridors. About 3.4 million people have now escaped across the border, about half of those children. Still, according to the UN, those refugees account for less than a third of Ukrainians left homeless since the start of the war. Jay Gray, NBC News, along the Poland-Ukraine border.
In the meantime, consumers are being hit hard with rising fuel and food costs being made even worse by the war in Ukraine. So in the Turks and Caicos, leaders have implemented tax breaks in order to help residents with rising inflation. Our One Caribbean News, DeAndre Hamilton reports.
Premier of the Turks and Caicos Islands, Washington Mizik, has announced a $15 million fuel and food tax break to soften the blow of rising inflation exacerbated by the conflict by Russia on the Ukraine. Mizik was speaking at a national press conference on March 15th. He said with no end in sight for Putin's war, his government is stepping in with concessions to force a drop in food and fuel prices.
The first concession here relates to the additional tax on fuel, and that is being reduced by 25%. The net benefit of that is that there will be a saving or a concession or an additional expense to government in the tune of $2.7 million in order to make fuel cheaper.
In the Turks and Caicos, the lowest price at the pumps is $6.35 U.S. and over 90% of consumer goods are imported. It means an expensive life for islanders.
In addition to the fuel, there's also proposed a CPF, that is customs processing fee, now stands at $7.5%. That will now be reduced to 5%. The total value of that reduction is somewhere around 12.26 or 26 or 27 million dollars, with a total package amounting to just under $15 million.
The duty discounts will last 12 months from April 1st. DeAndre Hamilton reporting.
All right, thanks for that report, DeAndre. Well, meantime, Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley's effort to get an 18-year-old appointed to the Senate has been unsuccessful. That's after her Barbados Labour Party victory at the polls back in January. Mottley had indicated she wanted to appoint Khalil Kathdawala as the government senator, but given the minimum age for appointment to the upper house, that being 21, a constitutional change was required. Now, the constitutional amendment was passed in the House of Assembly, but when it went to the Senate just last Friday, independent senators indicated they would not have supported that measure. Now, in a statement issued over the weekend, Prime Minister Motley said it was unfortunate that in the midst of a global turmoil with respect to youth in crisis, Barbados finds itself at a point where embracing youth people and youthful leadership is clearly still beyond its imagination. She said she had met with Katawala on Saturday, and disappointing him was one of the most difficult acts of her term to date as Prime Minister. However, the law student did say that he was humbled that a government would go to such lengths to create the opportunity for the voices of 18 to 20-year-olds who can vote to be heard in the ultimate chamber of decision-making.
It really was an honor to have been considered, and I must thank the Prime Minister and certainly her government, because it takes a visionary group of people to understand the absolute importance, the absolute need to have young people represented and to have women represented and members of the differently abled community.
And that was 18-year-old Khalil Katawala speaking there. Now, he did go on to say that he would continue to pursue his academic studies, but will remain a keen student of governance and the management of public life in Barbados. And switching gears now, if you are in need of a cake, maybe for an upcoming celebration in Puerto Rico, well, there's a Puerto Rican baker who has added her own little twist to the traditional art of cake baking. Our Francis Felix reports.
Catherine Neris is a cake sculptor from San Lorenzo, Puerto Rico. This talented artist is the creator of a majestic and unique culinary art on the island. She makes cake sculptures in three-dimensional shapes. This cake artist was born and raised in Sector Neris in San Lorenzo, like her last name, because all the family lives in the same sector. This cake sculptors start to make three-dimensional cakes less than a year ago. Catherine is autodidactic and incredible, had taken no classes, and tell us that cake sculptures are not common in Puerto Rico.
I started very young. I was a young mom. I have a part-time job, so I got bored. And I took a class for making cake, only make cake, not decorate.
Is there someone that inspired you to make cakes?
Okay, in my free time, I see TV shows of the bigger artists like Kate Boss or Natalie Sizer Cake Studio. They are sculptor cakes, and I love it.
Why do you decide to do three-dimensional cakes?
The reason is because I got bored to the traditional form. I want to do a cake to the next level because in Puerto Rico don't have that. For example, in sculpture cake, I made a Bad Bunny and Ednita Nazario. Just love to do a Cheyenne cake because he is the San Lorenzo like me and I love it. So if you hear me, Cheyenne, call me.
What are your future goals with your business? What you want to achieve?
I want to be the best sculptor cake artist of Puerto Rico, and I want to know the biggest artist of America. I have a phrase that I say out loud, vamos para Hollywood. So let's see what happens.
Out of the comfort zone, this cake artist challenged herself to make cakes in a different and not traditional way, keeping in mind her goals to grow her passion and to represent the island internationally. From San Lorenzo, Puerto Rico, Frances Felix.